It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good morning to everybody out there listening. We thank you so much for being with us today. Got a special treat for you on the line. We have the Arkansas Speaker of the House, Speaker Matthew Shepard. Speaker Shepard, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Glad to be with you.
Yes, sir. Let me just start by saying, because I haven't talked to you since your speech that started the 92nd General Assembly. I really appreciated your speech. I really thought it struck a tone of humility and mission for the public good and the people of Arkansas. So thank you so much for that delivery.
Well, thank you. It's always special when you get to address the House, and particularly on an occasion like that. And I really just tried to speak from the heart and just remind people that, we may have differences of opinion, but ultimately it's really not about us. It's really about serving the people of Arkansas. And so that's what I tried to remind, not just the members, but to remind myself. And honestly, as every day goes by, I try and reflect on some of those thoughts as I serve the people of Arkansas.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Again, we're talking with the Speaker of the House of the State of Arkansas, Matthew Shepard, this morning. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tax reform. Yesterday was good news. The day before, I was wondering what was going on, in the state Senate. But the governor's clean, standalone income tax bill yesterday passed out of the Arkansas Senate, got the 75% threshold that they needed. And so now we're going to look to the House, and let's assume that's going to get through committee. But everybody wants to know, where are we, or will we get to that 75% threshold, that 75 vote threshold out of 100 state representatives?
We're certainly going to try. We know going into this is from day one. We know with the supermajority threshold that's very tough. Let alone on an issue like this that has a lot of attention. I think we've got a great opportunity. There's clearly more work that needs to be done. And so now that it's out of the Senate and we have the bill here, over the next few days, that's going to be a top priority for me, is visiting with my fellow House colleagues and discussing the bill and understanding, if anybody has objections, what are those objections? I feel like that the vast majority, when we've talked about this, and I've already had a number of conversations on this, so I think when I think we can make the case as to why this is the right thing to do. But we also have members that, it may not be so much about the tax cut. They want to know, what are we going to do on highways, or what are we going to do, what are we doing with regard to education? So as you know, so many times these issues can become somewhat interrelated, and we're going to work very hard to see this thing through.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that's exactly what, according to Talk Business and Politics, they reported that one of the reasons Senator Bill Sample didn't vote the first time, and he also wasn't there yesterday, was because he was trying to get something on highways. And I've heard this from a few people around the Capitol, that the legislature, the individual members, they seem to be negotiating a lot more than maybe, say, past sessions. Would you agree with that?
I'm not aware of course, it's just now to the House, and I'm not aware of any kind of deals that have been struck on this bill. And what I've told my members is that, we want to vote it up or down on the merits of the bill. I'm very interested in highways, and that's something that I'm certainly working towards some type of legislation that can make myself and others understand that we're going to do something about highways. But as far as this bill, my focus and my message has been, let's take the vote, let the chips fall where they may. I mean, this is a tax cut, and for the vast majority of my colleagues, I think this is something that if they're just evaluating on the face of the bill, I think they can and should be supportive of. But we'll see. I mean, this is the legislative process, and each vote is very important. But my desire is to just take a straight up or down vote on the merits of the bill itself.
We're talking this morning with the Arkansas Speaker of the House, Matthew Shepard. We're very thrilled to have you on, sir. Let me ask you this. Are you getting any questions from members about what the tax burden, the overall tax burden on the people of Arkansas will be at the end, because like you said, it's a great tax cut bill, this income tax bill that the governor has put forward, bringing it from 6.9 to 5.9. But then we do have highways. Then we do have other individual bills that are going to come before. And are there any members, or are you concerned of trying to keep that overall tax burden either the same or hopefully lower when it's all said and done?
Well, it's obviously a concern, and really, in terms of my focus, so much of it is about the things that we pass out here. My desire on highways is I've felt that we need to move some general revenue funding towards highways, because I think that's important to let the people of Arkansas know that highways are a priority to us. And you'll recall that I believe 8 years ago we referred out that half-cent sales tax. And, I know that there's a lot of discussion, and, there probably is a pretty good chance that something else gets referred out. But, I personally feel like we've got to show that we've done more with what we already have, and that we've prioritized the highway funding issue. Clearly, it's always a concern when you look to where are we at, and ultimately over my 8 years here, we've cut a lot of taxes during that time. And I look back to my first session, and we as a Republican minority, we helped to push through $35 million in tax cuts, and that was like the biggest thing in the world at that time. And now here we are a few years later, and we've cut several hundred million more in taxes. But yeah, so we're obviously very aware of kind of the big picture here, and it's a very fluid situation.
Yeah.
The highway issue is so challenging. The need is so great. But, we're also trying to, at least for myself, I'm trying to be, as responsive as possible to, the people of Arkansas. And we want to try and put forth a good plan that people can feel comfortable with.
I'm glad you brought up general revenue for highways, because I think a lot of people, look to the other states that do that, and they think that's a good idea as well. Then there's also some people that look at the idea of, like, say, used car sales, and that money being dedicated for roads. Matter of fact, State Representative John Payton, he's got a bill, HB 1342, that would cut the sales tax on used vehicles, which is pretty interesting. It's I personally, Speaker Shepherd, I'm excited with the different ideas just generally that are out there of legislators trying to say, well, what about this? What about that? I think that's really healthy.
Yeah, and I'm certainly think that's a great part of the legislative process. Is I think my style, I have my opinions on things, and obviously am trying to provide some leadership to the House, and work with the governor and the Senate to help guide us through this session and get to a place where we can do the people's work and go home and know we did a good job for the people of Arkansas. But one of the things that I do like about the legislative process is it allows everyone to throw their ideas out there. And, as I said, the first day of session, sometimes people can think, well, why is this being proposed? Why is that being proposed? Sometimes things can be kind of dismissed. But as I said, the first day, when I look out there, I look at each member and I recognize that they represent 30,000 people. And so when proposals are brought forth, there's a lot of them that obviously I may be very supportive of. There's maybe some that I'm supportive of, but maybe I don't feel like with our, where we're at from a fiscal standpoint, maybe it's just not doable at this time. But even on those things that I'm like, why is this being proposed? I also try and step back and remember, hey, each legislator, each House member represents a very significant number of Arkansans, and so I think that's one of the great things and the beauty of the legislative process.
Let's talk about ethics a little bit. Moving on for tax reform. A lot of the confidence, I guess, because of what's been in the headlines, because of corruption of public officials, of politicians, the people of Arkansas are kind of scratching their head, and they're like, oh, what's going on down there? Now, a lot of that has been more focused on the Senate side, right? But I think just generally, a lot of people are just, you guys are under their microscope now. And then, of course, we had details in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, a couple weeks ago about, secret business partners connected with nursing homes and legislators, that was kind of concealed and everything else. So what do you think, or what needs to be done to restore the confidence, that the people need to have in their government?
Well, I think that, let me first say that I think the people that are serving here in the House and the Senate, they, I believe we've got a good group of legislators here that are trying to do the right thing. I think that as far as what can we do to bolster and repair to the extent that maybe the legislature or state government as a whole, maybe to the extent it's been tarnished, is I think it's a combination of things. I think the transparency is a huge part of that. As you know, the House, we've streamed for a number of years, and we've expanded that streaming to include all committees. And I think that's valuable because oftentimes you may see it's, just know it came out of committee, that even with a roll call, you see yays and nays, but without the video, you're not going to know, well, who was making what arguments and who spoke up and what questions were asked. And so I think that's a big component of it, is just continuing to bolster that transparency. We're continuing to look at what other things can we do to improve and make the legislature more transparent, and also try and eliminate any shortfall that may exist, or any loophole, if you will, that may exist. For me, and I want to be very careful about what we do, because the vast majority of the things for which people have been are being prosecuted or have been convicted of are not really gray areas. I mean, it's don't take bribes and kickbacks, and those things are already obviously strictly prohibited and are subject to serious punishments. But I think that it's a matter of let's look, what do we have an issue? Is there a rule or piece of legislation that addresses that issue? And if so, we want to do so in a means that is clear, so that both members and the public know exactly what's expected and what the parameters of conduct are. We're continuing to look at some things. I mean, you probably saw there were a few pieces of legislation that were filed earlier this week, and then I'm on the House end. There's a few things that I'm looking at to try and maybe offer some rule changes on the House end that, in part, to be somewhat proactive, but also just to try and make sure that we've got clear parameters for our members. And then, I think, but ultimately, the key to this, it starts with each one of us. And, for me, whether I'm a legislator or not, I have a standard of conduct for myself and how I'm going to handle myself because, I don't want my reputation to be tarnished.
Yeah.
So for me, whether I'm a legislator or just back home practicing law, whatever the case may be, I'm holding myself to a high standard. I think each one of us has to hold ourselves to a similarly high standard. We have to be cognizant of the fact that this has been an issue. We need to try and avoid allowing ourselves to intentionally or unintentionally being put in situations that could call us, call our conduct into question. But the final thing is, it really goes back, voters. It really goes back to the voters that we need to support and elect individuals of high moral conduct and character, and that's where it starts. And that's really been my message as I've talked to different groups and organizations. Is that's an important component that we sometimes maybe we gloss over because we think, well, we're just going to support so-and-so because we think they have the same view as we do on this particular issue or whatever. I think we have to start with the question of looking at people's character and integrity from the very outset.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Speaker of the House, Matthew Shepard, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. It's been a pleasure, sir, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. Good talking to you, Paul.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Folks, that's Speaker of the House, Matthew Shepard.